Hi, I'm your host, the Drungeon Blaster, and this is episode 1 of Mnemonic Enhancer, here to offer you this week's piece of system agnostic cyberpunk tabletop advice. Today's episode is called Make It Punk. What do I mean by punk? Well, to really answer that question, we have to ask, what is cyberpunk? Traditionally, the answer has been high tech, low life, but there's another component that's often overlooked, especially by newer GMs: anti authoritarianism. Remember, folks, cyberpunk is more than just a flashy neon aesthetic with flying cars and laser arms. It's a statement, a darker lens on a future 20 minutes away. When I say anti authoritarianism, it's not a specific statement. Every cyberpunk setting will have some sort of oppressor, be it a mega corporation, a tyrannical police state, cutthroat gang lords, or some other variety of powerful evil, likely many. Your job as GM is to pick one or two aspects that you really enjoy running and lean into them. This, in my opinion, is half of the key to keeping cyberpunk games from becoming mission focused, low narrative beer and pretzels games. Of course, there's nothing wrong with beer and pretzels games, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. So let's talk about the tyrants and misers and how to incorporate them into your game. We're going to talk about police states first because they're my personal favorite flavor of dystopia. Now, it should be stated that police states make an especially excellent backdrop for games centered on political intrigue, revolution, or vigilantism. Personally, I draw a lot of inspiration from Judge Dredd here: fascist super cops and spiffy outfits. Of course, there's much more to it than that. Police violence should be gratuitous, the government should rule the setting with an iron fist, and your players should constantly be worried about getting caught by Big Brother. Nazi Germany is, of course, the iconic police state, but imagine what it would look like in a transhumanist world. Suddenly, we're talking about superhuman cops ripping babies away from their mothers' hands, and mad scientists creating inhuman monsters to snuff out the resistance. All right, now we're on to perhaps the most iconic baddies: megacorporations. I'm personally of the opinion that megas are at their villainous best in plots focused on gentrification and cold wars between corporations, because of course political intrigue is an obvious candidate for your main theme in a mega-focused campaign. My favorite source to draw inspiration from for this type of game, aside from the obvious genre staples, is either the various banana republics or the feudal era. While the feudal era may seem out of place, when you reframe things and look at the megas as the warlords in the equation, it makes perfect sense. Western films can also be a great place to draw ideas from for this type of campaign. Finally, our last example is going to be gangers. Gangers will always have a special place in my heart as the perfect low level goons. They're often nameless throwaway cast that the players will see and immediately know that they can swap out the jail rounds for hollow points. Personally, I believe gangers are at their best in political intrigue campaigns, as a good gang war can create a hell of a game, affording extra opportunities for players to indulge in saboteur hijinks and maybe even join both sides. My favorite source of inspiration for campaigns like this, outside of Cyberpunk 20XX, is the heyday of the Casa Nostra. Of course, there are tons of great options here, with this specific genre being possibly the one with the most real world sources to draw from. This is another aspect that makes ganger campaigns great. There are just so many real life events to draw on that sometimes feel even stranger than fiction. All right, moving on to our second point, it is time to discuss one of the most important steps: marginalizing your players' characters. The world should feel oppressive at nearly every turn of the journey, save, of course, for select safe havens. One of my favorite tactics is to have a handful of dirty cops take notice of your players right away early off in the campaign. I like to have them start by keeping tabs on and harassing the players, and then whenever they leave the sprawl, having them show up. Another fun maneuver is to set up toll booths, controlled either by a powerful gang or megacorporation. Naturally, the trolls should fluctuate wildly, rising at the most inconvenient or dramatic of times. The biggest lever here, so to speak, is the option to involve the player's loved ones and have them upset whatever regime is in place. This step is useful for a number of reasons. Firstly, it makes the world feel dystopian. Secondly, it allows you to seed the larger plot, giving you ample opportunities to set up your villain and their regime. Finally, it gives your players a reason to want to fight back, stand up to the man, and flip both fingers, so to speak. For our final point, I'd like to talk about how you can keep your game world from feeling overwhelming for your players. After all, living in the conditions we've been discussing today would be unarguably soul crushing. This is why it's vitally important to give your players embers of light to kindle and nourish in the bleak landscape that is your cyberpunk dystopia. My favorite way to facilitate this is by introducing communities based on mutual aid, allowing those forced to live in the sprawl to almost thrive. Perhaps a neighborhood that your players do a job for early on in the campaign becomes a recurring customer. Maybe they pay a little less, but they offer fringe benefits such as safety within their borders. This also offers great opportunities for Robin Hood style missions. Alternatively, perhaps your players start a large scale crew of criminals, slowly working up to the point where they can usurp the city's more cruel crime lords and replace them with more tempered hands. This step is important because it gives your players tangible goals to strive towards, an agenda outside of simply doing the mission of the week and getting rich. It's pertinent to note that this step should be something that affects a corner of the world, but doesn't dismiss the greater darkness of the setting. Well, that's it for today's episode. As always, I hope I gave you something of value. Have a great day, and thank you so much for tuning in.